now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over Live. The terrorist army Islamic State, ISIS, struck again this week, beheading a second American journalist, Steven Sotloff, just weeks after brutally murdering photojournalist James Foley. ISIS has taken over 35,000 square miles of territory in Syria and Iraq and continues to persecute Christians and other religious and ethnic minorities in the region. To discuss the American policy and the threats facing Europe and the U.S. homeland, my first guest is an advisor to the Anti-Terrorism Caucus of the U.S. House of Representatives. He is also author of the book, The Lost Spring, U.S. Policy in the Middle East and Catastrophes to Avoid, Dr. Walid Phares. And via satellite is a former congressman from Florida who served on the House Armed Services Committee and before that with distinction in the U.S. Army. Please welcome Colonel Allen West. Thank you for joining us. I want to start with this joint message we saw, this op-ed, David Cameron and President Obama before this NATO meeting. They're saying they will not be cowed by these barbaric killers, yet there seems to be no direct strategy. Your thoughts?
Well, Raymond, this is an op-ed that I can consider as a preamble. You know, now we're waiting for the actual text of the strategy. And of course, the debate in Washington here is, where is that strategy? What I know is that ISIS has a strategy. And the strategy of ISIS is to make sure that they are delaying us, that they are deterring us, the beheading, it's to intimidate us. But at the same time, it's to prepare themselves inside the United States and also to get more jihadists around the world to come and join them. If they do this, then we'll have to pay a much higher price. They are very smart in their strategy.
Colonel Allen West, I want to play something for you. This is President Obama in Estonia. Listen to this and react, please.
Our objective is clear, and that is to degrade and destroy ISIL so that it's no longer a threat. We know that if we are joined by the international community, we can continue to shrink ISIL's sphere of influence, its effectiveness, its financing, its military capabilities, to the point where it is a manageable problem. And the question is going to be making sure we've got the right strategy, but also making sure that we've got the international will to do it.
Statement are three different, pieces. You heard him say degrade, then you heard him say destroy, then you heard him say that if we are joined by the international community, we can turn into a manageable problem. Well, the point is this: which one is it, Mr. President? And even in his presentation, you did not see a very strong presentation, and those are the optics that the enemy sees. And the enemy right now, as Walid says, they have the initiative. They are on the march. They have a strategy. They have a plan. And this is not something new. We know now that the president has been receiving daily briefings on ISIS for a little over a year. And we have allowed it to metastasize to this point where they have committed a horrible genocide. They have taken landmass that now equals Great Britain, and we still don't have any type of action. The rhetoric, that's fine, but now we have to see action, and that is what they understand in that part of the world, is strength and might.
Colonel West, were the beheadings of those two Americans, one this week, one a month ago, James Foley, were these acts of war in your opinion?
Well, absolutely. And as well, ISIS has already declared war against the United States of America. And for us to sit back and look at this as some type of law enforcement or criminal investigation saying that we're going to bring this individual or these individuals to justice, the only justice that you can do is to truly destroy this ISIS entity and this enemy. But most importantly, you must cut off this ideology. You must understand who are its state sponsors, its financial resourcing stream, and you also have to tackle it within our own borders where we know that we have a problem with homegrown jihadism.
Okay. Walid Phares, who are the supporters? Where is the financing coming from for this ISIS? It seems to be spreading like a cancer, not only in the Middle East, all over the world.
Well, first you have the genesis, and then you have when ISIS was born, and it has a life of its own. In the genesis, a lot of petrodollars that came from the Arabian Peninsula, from the Gulf, to jihadists before they mutate and become ISIS. So that's why today there's criticism against Saudi Arabia, against Qatar. Yes, a lot of money came there, and also against some of the militias who were in Libya that have been shipped to Syria. Remember, in 2012, many of those have been shipped, including with our help. All of this, at the end of the day, part of it at least, became ISIS. Now, ISIS is on its own. It's a creature on its own. It has $2 billion. It has a lot of weapons. It is growing by the day. And it is developing its international network of cells, which is of great concern to me.
The president has committed to send 350 more troops to the region. They will be in the American Iraqi embassy. That means there are 1,000 troops now on the ground. So much for this no boots on the ground routine. How effective is that? Is that enough firepower, if you will, to repel ISIS? And are these troops in danger since we've communicated, hey, they're here, they're sitting all here at the American embassy?
Let me begin with a second point, very important. If I'm the president, I would not announce that I'm sending hundreds to the south in Baghdad and few dozens to Erbil. Why? Because I would be signaling to the other side that there are so few. If we were sending divisions and we are leading a campaign against ISIS, then be it. But when we signal those numbers, it will be a little bit of concern to me.
Colonel West, your thoughts, what are you hearing from the military community, particularly those in Iraq? They seem to be, the messages I've been getting are, they have no message. They're just sitting there awaiting orders. Your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I found it very interesting that now it seems that President Obama has negotiated a status of forces agreement with Iraq so that we can have troops that are there on the ground. But the most important thing that any American or any combat troop wants to know is what is their task and what is their purpose. And I wholeheartedly agree with Walid in that you don't tell the enemy we're sending 200 here, 300 there, and they're just sitting down at the embassy. This president continues to tell the enemy what he is not willing to do, what he does not want to do, and that's a very serious intransigent ideology. And so what is very frustrating for our military right now, they don't know what the guidance is. They don't know what the commander's intent is. And I can assure you that in the U.S. Central Command, they have contingency plans that are there. They just have to pull something off of the shelf. They have to adjust it, change some assumptions to the facts that they know today, and be willing to execute it. But they're not getting any direction from a White House, and especially from a president that continues to tell us what he is not willing to do and that he was elected to end wars. And that shows that he has a recalcitrance and understanding that the enemy has a vote.
I want to throw this out to both of you because, I mean, the president is suggesting, as he did at NATO, that there be some rapid response force made up of NATO member countries. A good idea?
It's a good idea depending where is it going to intervene from inside Iraq. I wouldn't be very comfortable in having this rapid force in Baghdad. This is Iranian influence place. This is very much penetrated at this point in time. I would recommend the North. We have the Kurds as our allies. I hope to see the minorities, both Christians and Yazidis, also trained and armed. So the North is a safer place if you want to conduct an intervention.
What do you make? You mentioned a moment ago they're under the sway of Iran, the Iraqi security forces. We're sending troops in to train the Iraqi security forces. That's part of the strategy so far.
It is, and that has to be addressed because the Iranian influence, Iran now has Pasdaran, meaning Iranian Revolutionary Guards brigades, inside Iraq. So basically we are in the same trench as the Iranians, while this same force is on our list of terrorist organizations. Hezbollah already is inside Iraq. That's why I wouldn't recommend the southern front, but the northern front.
I want to play this for you. Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel talking about ISIS and the threat it presents not only in Iraq, but around the globe. Listen.
We have acknowledged publicly, we are aware of over 100 U.S. citizens who have U.S. passports who are fighting in the Middle East with ISIL forces. There may be more. We don't know. This crowd is as dangerous a group of people beyond just terrorists. They are an army. With marrying this with an ideology and capacity to do things. They control half of Iraq today. They control half of Syria today. We better be taking them serious.
Are we taking it seriously enough? And what is the threat here to the homeland, Colonel West?
Well, I don't think that we are taking it seriously enough, because back in January, when ISIS crossed into Iraq and took Fallujah and al-Ramadi, there were only about 1,500 to 2,000 man strength at the time, and we did nothing. And now you have a global ideological movement that is being aligned with Abu Sayyaf out of Philippines, Jamaat al-Islami out of Indonesia, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula is pledging allegiance, Ansar al-Sharia out of Libya, and even Boko Haram is talking about being allied to ISIS. So you have a global terrorist movement and army, a jihadist army that is occurring right now. And the funny thing is that when I listen to Secretary of Defense Hagel, I also remember that this is the same Secretary of Defense from the Pentagon who is sending out pink slips to our combat leaders. So how can we say that we're going to create a rapid response force when we're degrading our military capability? And the best rapid response force that you have on the ground right now is the Kurdish Peshmerga army, who has been starved of resources, weapons, and arms that they've been asking this administration for quite some time.
Now, the president has said he is going to arm the Kurds, or we're in the process of doing that, correct? I mean, we have to state the record.
Well, I have listened to the Kurds say it's not there yet. And as a matter of fact, I think Walid will agree, you have the Iranians up there now trying to supply weapons and support to the Kurds. So again, we are being pushed out because of, this overly cautious manner. I think that, once again, we have a president that is operating under a foreign policy and national security premise of not doing stupid you-know-what stuff. And that is not what we should be operating under. Events are starting to dictate what the president, his response is.
Walid Phares, we hear reports there's at least one Boston man now who is also signed on to ISIS and may be part of this very well-orchestrated media outreach and recruitment campaign.
There is a difference between what law enforcement, and they're doing a good job, is achieving, catching these people, and the reality of the pool that we have here. When I go to the chat rooms and see this discussion and chat between those based in the West, including the United States, and those based in the region, I see that the numbers are much greater. I am concerned, again, that what's happening in the United States is that the jihadists who are based here, who have been indoctrinated, are switching to ISIS. It's not that ISIS is recruiting more. They are simply switching.
Switching their allegiance.
Switching their allegiance from Al-Qaeda, from being lone wolves. Look, there was an information about Major Hassan from jail issuing a letter to the media saying that he wants to become a citizen of ISIS, of the caliphate. What would that mean? This message is not for ISIS, it's for the other jihadists inside the United States.
Colonel West, your thoughts on, are we doing enough to prevent an attack either in Europe or here? David Cameron was very clear. He raised the threat level this week, expecting some sort of ISIS attack in Great Britain.
No, we're not doing enough here, Raymond. And you look at the fact that we have such a porous, open border with Mexico right now. There are reports already that ISIS is working with the narco-terrorists down in Mexico. They're establishing a base of operations in and around Ciudad Juarez, which is right across from El Paso, Texas. But instead, you have a Department of Justice that's more so interested in going after the police in Ferguson, Missouri, accusing them of being racist, than investigating what is happening in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where we have already had 2 Americans that were killed on the battlefield in Syria fighting for ISIS. We have a problem in this country, but political correctness, and I hate to say it, a political agenda and ideology, and you have an infiltration of Muslim Brotherhood types within this Obama administration are precluding us from doing what is necessary to protect our homeland.
Walid Phares, speak for a moment about the strain of Islam we're seeing. Why is it so attractive now? I mean, I've spoken to scholars this week who tell me, look, this is not beyond the pale of Islam, that this tracks nicely with the general Islamic teachings, the teachings of Muhammad.
Well, look, the jihadists are capable going up to history, back to history, Islamic history, or finding verses or finding text, and then merge them into a document that would become a jihadi ideology. I am now noticing that many of our officials, U.S. officials, are using the term ideology. Now, 5 years ago, What did they say? This is not about ideology. This is about frustration. This is about neo-colonialism. So now they are realizing indeed that what's behind ISIS and Al-Qaeda is a jihad.
A selective ideology, selectively using the Quranic verses to their own ends. And you're dealing with people who are largely, according to many of the reports I've been reading, largely ignorant. Some of them can't even write their names.
Let me give you an example. In the West, both of Great Britain and here, there's this theory of we're going to have fatwas, you know, religious edict, and the fatwas will solve the situation. ISIS is not listening to them, because this is something you have to do before they are indoctrinated. Once you are indoctrinated, you have that chip in your head, then you are immune. You are immune to any counter-radicalization.
Colonel West, very quickly, before I let you go, speak to a moment about the religious fervor that is driving so much of this. This isn't just waving the flag for a given country. It is a deeply held belief, indeed a pathway to paradise for these militants, these terrorists.
Yes, you're absolutely right. It is a reward in paradise that they are being told, but also it's about the Islamic supremacism. And that is what we have to be very concerned about, and we cannot dismiss this. We cannot wish it away. It is part of the ideology. It is part of their teachings, and we have to understand that this is just an ongoing chapter in some 1,400 years of conflagration between the Islamic East and the Western civilization. You know, you can go back and you can study the Battle of Tours in France at 728, the Battle of Lepanto at 1571, the Battle of Vienna at 1683. These are all historic, ancient instances. And there was a reason why the Pope Urban II called for, protection of Christians in the Holy Land in 1095, because exactly what we're seeing today. And understand that this genocide of Christians and Yazidis, it also occurred under the Ottoman Empire from 1914 to 1919. So there's nothing new under the sun.
Colonel Allen West, thank you for being with us. We are going to continue this conversation. Religious minorities, particularly Christians in Iraq, are facing what is being called, what we've heard called tonight, a genocide. When we return, Walid Phares will stay with us. He'll be joined by David Lazar, a native of Iraq and a Christian. They'll update us on the current conditions in the region and their efforts to establish a safe haven for Iraqi Christians when the World Over Live continues. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to the World Over Live. The terrorized Christian community in Iraq is facing complete extermination at the hands of ISIS. To discuss the situation on the ground in Iraq and their efforts to establish a protected safe haven for Christians in the region, I am joined once again by Dr. Walid Phares. He's an anti-terrorism advisor to the U.S. House of Representatives. And via satellite from Los Angeles is the chairman of the American Mesopotamian Organization, David Lazar, a Christian and an Iraqi native. Thank you both for being here. I want to start with the state of these refugees. David Lazar, what are you hearing from the Christian community in northern Iraq as well as Syria?
Well, in northern Iraq, first of all, they're not refugees because they are still within the boundaries of Iraq, so they're internally displaced persons or people. The status of refugee is when someone leaves the country,
flee to another country.
Sure. They are now in as internally displaced people inside the region controlled or under the control of the Kurdish regional government. The majority of them are there. Of course, there are people that have gone into to stay with relatives in Baghdad and in Basra and other cities throughout the country. But the majority or the bulk of them are in the the region under the control of the Kurdish regional government. Their conditions are horrible. They're staying in churches, in schools. Actually, we've seen also people staying in parks and on the sidewalks. As a matter of fact, school year starts on next Tuesday in northern Iraq, and the Kurdish regional government has asked few thousand families to leave these schools, and with no plans to house them or put them in tent or anywhere else in the area. So it's a big problem. It's a dilemma. Where would these people go? And the United Nations and other non-governmental organizations are not ready for so many IDPs in the country.
I want to read you something. This is from the Maronite Catholic Archbishop Paul Saya. He told Vatican Radio this week, if you don't stop ISIS now, it will spread. How dangerous is ISIS, particularly to this Christian community, if it isn't stopped now?
You know, Bishop Saya has a long research and history in understanding these Christian minorities. He's one of the experts. He is right. ISIS is threatening the Christians with dismantlement, with physical elimination, if they do not move away from the areas they control. Remember, in Mosul last June, they gave all the Christians 3 choices, or 4. Either you go to become Muslim, or you leave, or you pay a tax, or you are killed.
Right.
So that's the parameter under which Christians in northern Iraq, and that's why the ethnic cleansing that took place in northern Iraq hit the Yazidis, but also hundreds of thousands of Christians in the Nineveh Valley.
It's scandalous. David, I wanted you to talk for a moment about your recent trip to the UN. You went asking them, with a series of other NGOs, that a Christian haven be established, a safe haven for these Christians fleeing the persecution and murderous intents of ISIS. What was the reaction like, and who are these NGOs?
Well, first of all, we went as part of the Middle East Christian Committee, which is comprised of Maronite Christians, Belkite Christians, also Coptic Christians, and Chaldeans and Assyrians. These are, of course, Chaldeans and Assyrian Christians are one nation, but we're talking about denominations of different denominations of within, the body of Christ. We went there and asked the international, met with 5 actually missions to the United Nations. 4 of them are from the permanent members. There was France, United States, UK, and Russia as well. We met with the Italian mission to the UN. And we also met with the political division of the United Nations itself. We are asking for direct humanitarian aid to NGOs that are working on the ground and without going through any government agencies, such as the federal government in Baghdad or the regional government in Erbil. So because there's a lot of waste and there's a lot of help is not reaching the intended people. And at the same time, we asked for an internationally protected area, not a safe haven. A safe haven, we don't like the term, because once there is no need for a safe haven, everything can go back to how it used to be. Well, we don't want that.
So you're talking about
Iraqi military or the Kurdish militia are not able of protecting our areas. So we're asking for internationally protected region in the Nineveh Plain and also in the Sinjar for the Yazidis. Now, in the Nineveh Plain, it's not only Christians. We have Assyrian Christians, and we also have Yazidis, and we also have Shabak. So it's different people from different ethnic backgrounds and different religions. The Shabaks are mainly Shiites, and the Yazidis are, of course, the Yazidis, and the Assyrian Christians are Christians.
Walid,
so,
let me just give me a second here, David. Walid, tell me, give me your sense of, if this isn't a safe haven, is it a protected, enduring community, an enclave that you're looking to establish?
The legal future of what would that be, we don't know.
Or minority enclave,
for all the minorities zone. But there's a sequence that's very important. All of this discussion is theoretical, because the Christians, the Yazidis, and other minorities have been ethnic cleansed, and they are in Kurdistan. So what the delegation has demanded from the Security Council for the first time is, first of all, to bring this population back to their homes. There is a fear that ISIS will settle in their own people and family, and then
there's no home to go back to.
There's no home to go. Second, the best would be if an international force would come and just protect those areas around them. But those forces will one day have to leave. So what David is trying to say is that inside those areas, you need to empower the minorities themselves, Assyrian, Chaldean, Turkmen, to arm themselves as a police force on the ground. Therefore, they will be under the international protection.
David Lazar, do Christians and these minorities even want to remain in Iraq? So many have left. They're in Jordan. They're fleeing to the United States. Do they want to stay at all?
Well, of course, there are people that want to leave, and we don't want to stop them. You know, I can't sit here in the United States and ask people to stay. But the majority of them, yes, they do want to stay. Now, our numbers before the 2003 invasion or liberation, however you want to look at it, was about 1.4, 1.5 million. There's only about the Assyrian Christians. Now we're half of that. But where would it stop? When would it stop? I mean, reducing or diluting our numbers is not going to solve the problem. The problem is ISIS, is not our numbers there. So the international community must address this problem, and by offering us an equal opportunity to stay in our lands, in our ancestral lands that we've been living there for thousands of years, I think that will be the right thing to do now. These refugees that are waiting for visas in Jordan or in Lebanon or in other places, if they know that they can go back and reestablish their lives with security, with proper security there, I assure you a lot of them will go back instead of going to Europe or Australia, Canada, and the United States.
Walid, your thoughts on this whole notion of the UN sending 11 investigators in to chronicle and look at the crimes of ISIS, the potential war crimes of ISIS, and then the report back in March. Yeah. Is that too long? And haven't we established ISIS is this terrorist, barbarous organization?
If the first report about the ethnic cleansing and the war crimes will be established in March, when will the Nuremberg-like tribunal be formed to try all these atrocities? That would be in 5-6 years from now. No, we need speed. We need the formation of a tribunal. We need to have teams on the ground. But for that to happen, we need a strategy. We really need the President of the United States, Prime Minister of Great Britain, NATO in general, and the Arab moderates to actually create that space of freedom. Then we'll have our time to go and do the trials.
Patriarch Louis Sacco, the Chaldean patriarch, Catholic Chaldean patriarch in Baghdad, had this to say: 120,000 Christians are uprooted from their historical homeland because the political Islam does not want them there, and the world is silent, standing still, either because it approves or because it is incapable of acting. This encourages ISIS to move forward with its ferocious war against culture and diversity and threatening the intellectual and social security. David, do you agree with those comments?
I absolutely do. I absolutely do. These criminals must be punished. I mean, Colonel West earlier referred to the genocide of 1915 against the Assyrian Christians and Armenian Christians and also the Greeks. The perpetrators of these massacres were never punished. That's why, and of course there were other massacres that happened in Iraq in 1933, the Al-Anfal, 1969. So if these massacres or genocides or crimes against humanity go unpunished, then there will be more of these happening in the future. So these people must be put on trial. And justice must be served.
Walid, this week we had another report. A man was arrested, a Christian man, urged to convert. He refused. He was tortured, then killed and thrown into the street. How common is this? I'm going to ask both of you that question.
That's what we know about, but there are reports coming from the region, from Mosul. There are testimonies. And this has to go to The Hague. This has to go to this international tribunal. These are war crimes, and these are crimes against humanity at the same time. Many Christians refused were killed in Mosul and in the valley.
David, are you hearing the same thing from your sources on the ground?
Yeah. Yes, I am. And as a matter of fact, also the Yazidis, I mean, these poor people have suffered so much. People have been burned alive. Their women have been taken and sold in market like animals. So these are all crimes against humanity. Well, let's not also forget the Turkoman, the Shiite Turkoman in the town of Amirli. They fought for weeks, and so many people were killed and buried alive there, and it took the militias, the Shiite militias supported by the government, to break the siege and finally free these people in this town. So ISIS has not discriminated. It's gone against Shiites, against Christians, and also against the Yazidis.
Yeah, that's what's so puzzling, Walid. I mean, you have ISIS is indiscriminately killing anyone that isn't a member of ISIS. They're even killing fellow Muslims.
Of course, in Syria, in Iraq, everywhere. They killed Shia, they killed Sunni.
And now it's spread to Lebanon.
It has been spreading to Lebanon, to Erbil, northeastern part of Lebanon. But there's one thing about ISIL. When they find resistance, they stop. So this is a lesson. What David was mentioning was a little town of Shia Turkoman, which refused to flee, which refused to self-ethnic cleanse. They fought. They lost a lot of people. They waited for help. So this is a lesson for the provinces in the north, in Nineveh and in Sinjar. These people, if they are backed, if they are trained, if they are armed, if they are under international supervision, they are their own boots on their own ground.
Very interesting. Talk to me about the threat now that we see a Lebanese officer being killed, a Muslim.
Yeah, a Muslim Lebanese officer was beheaded on video. It was posted. There is a battle in North Lebanon, not just in the area where ISIS attacked. We can see at least 3 areas where ISIS is going to come back to, and this is the battlefield of Lebanon, of northern Lebanon.
David, before I let you go, there's a group of patriarchs from the region, the Middle East, coming into Washington next week. What do you think will be the effect of that meeting? They're going to testify on Capitol Hill and I imagine try to meet with members of the administration. Your thoughts?
Yes, well, I will be there as well. I don't know how effective that would be because if you look at most of these patriarchs or representatives, their seats or where they are headquartered in are cities under the control of either the Syrian regime or influenced by the Iranian regime. So we'll see. We'll have to see and how effective it is. But it's enough talk. Action needs to be taken. Perhaps these patriarchs can deliver a message that we've already been delivered and stress on it. But we've been talking and to the administration, to the UN, and other places that this problem needs to be solved, and it's an international problem, not just an Iraqi or Syrian problem.
David Lazar, thank you so much for joining us. Walid, final question. Do you have any confidence that the international community can come to a consensus? Is a consensus even in the offing at this point?
As is right now, no. If the president is battling to get an alliance with Mr. Cameron, and that's the core, we're talking about other countries in Europe. We're talking about Arab moderate countries. We're talking about what would be the role of Syria and Iran. We're talking about what Turkey would do. And we're talking about the veto at the Security Council by the Russians that we are confronting. The architecture actually of our foreign policy is very weak. We need to reform that. We need to catch up. ISIS is moving fast.
We'll leave it there. You can find out more about the American Mesopotamian Organization and their work on behalf of the Iraqi Christian community by visiting AmericanMesopotamian.org. The Lost Spring, U.S. Policy in the Middle East and Catastrophes to Avoid by Dr. Walid Phares is available at bookstores everywhere and online. Walid, thank you for being here.